Joining me now is award-winning documentary filmmaker and the CEO and Jerusalem bureau chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, Alex Traiman. Alex, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So with Secretary of State Rubio speaking at the joint press conference there with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I'd really like to take a listen to that and I'll let you react. Here we go.
The president's been very clear. Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force. And frankly, as long as it stands as a force that can govern or as a force that can administer or as a force that can threaten by use of violence, peace becomes impossible.
So really doubling down here, do you agree that peace is impossible if Hamas is in power?
Well, I mean, that's been the trajectory of Hamas since they took over the Gaza Strip in 2007. So certainly the prime minister has made it one of his war goals that Hamas should not be a military nor the political force inside the Gaza Strip. And it seems as though now with President Trump in office that the new administration agrees with this position.
Are you concerned about phase two and actually happening? Do you feel like the ceasefire deal is really on even shakier ground after hearing these comments at all?
Well, you get the sense that Netanyahu agreed to the ceasefire deal in order to get hostages back, but that as far as he was concerned, the war is not over. Certainly, Israel's gotten some of the hostages back, but there could be as many as 30 or 40 others that are still alive. So Netanyahu understands at this point that negotiating is really the only way to get back the hostages, even though you don't want to be negotiating with terrorists. So
we're taking some live pictures there at the Daytona 500. Donald Trump is there for the 67th running of the 500. And we're going to go ahead and take a listen to our national anthem, and we'll come back to you. So you hear that, the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we just heard from one of the hostages, American Keith Siegel. He released this video statement, and we showed a portion of it yesterday, but he's basically thanking President Trump almost completely for being the one who was able to bring him home. How much do you think Trump had to do with bringing the hostages home so far in phase one of the ceasefire agreement?
Well, I think that's obvious. I mean, the Biden administration had tried for 15 months to get hostages back, and it wasn't until Trump said that all the hostages had better be released by the time he came into office that Hamas was willing to negotiate another deal. And I think that the same ultimatum that he's now given, he said that all the hostages needed to be released by this past Saturday. Now, we certainly didn't see that, but we've also seen Israel mobilize its troops again to re-enter Gaza should these next round of negotiations not go well. It's only the buildup of force and the threat of force that Netanyahu believes will force Hamas's hand and get a release of hostages.
Under this phase one, 600 aid trucks supposed to be going in. Do you think that the Palestinians are getting the relief that they need as part of this deal?
Well, Hamas is still taking control of the aid when it comes in, and there's been reports of them basically hijacking the aid, selling it at exorbitant prices. So at some point, there's got to be an alternative to Hamas's administration of the Strip, and that even includes the humanitarian aid.
Gosh, same old story of what was going on before the ceasefire. Netanyahu also spoke at that press conference earlier about the dangers presented by Iran. We can't forget that that's who's behind all of this. Let's listen.
Today, Secretary Rubio and I had a very productive discussion with our staffs on a number of issues. None of them are more important than Iran. Israel and America stand shoulder to shoulder in countering the threat of Iran. We agreed that the Ayatollahs must not have nuclear weapons. And we also agreed that Iran's aggression in the region has to be rolled back.
So what can the United States and Israel do to prevent Iran, one of the biggest sponsors of terrorism in the world, from getting their hands on nuclear weapons?
Well, the president has just reenacted a very harsh sanctions regime on Iran. But the question is, how long does it take for a sanctions regime to have the intended effect? And what guarantees would it be that the Iranian regime would would dismantle their own nuclear facilities, or how long would it take for the Iranian people to overthrow their own government? So it seems as though Israel feels that the timeline here is too short, and we saw the United States today just complete the delivery of a delivery of 2,000-pound bombs that were held up by the Biden administration. And we have to wonder if the Trump administration is giving other bombs, bunker-busting bombs to Israel. But it seems as though we're moving closer to the time when Israel will strike heavily at Iran's nuclear facility.
We also can't forget that Israel has adversaries in multiple fronts, and the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel expires on Tuesday. But there is a new report from the New York Times revealing that Israel plans to stay in 5 strategic points despite the terms of the ceasefire. Could this move cause another flare-up in fighting there?
I think it's unlikely. The prime minister seems to want to maintain the current status quo in which you don't have Hezbollah nor Israel firing across the border the way we saw months earlier. Right now, you have a quiet. However, if Israel will remove itself from those 5 strategic locations, it's basically a guarantee that Hezbollah can rearm south of the Litani River near the Israeli border. So hopefully with President Trump's permission, Netanyahu will maintain troops at these 5 strategic locations and get this new Lebanese government to adhere to that, those positions, so that Netanyahu can do what he calls enforcing the ceasefire.
Of course, if we do make it to phase 2 and then phase 3 of the ceasefire, what would happen is the remains of the dead hostages would be returned. We don't know how many are even still living. And then the other piece of it would be reconstruction of Gaza, and that would begin. What do you make of Trump's plan to try to move out the Palestinian population?
The Palestinians have no place to live right now. Now, the prime minister just spoke this evening here to a group of American Jewish leaders, and he said this is not a plan of forced transfer or ethnic cleansing. He is stressing that Gazans should be given a choice, that Gazans have been locked inside the Strip since the beginning of the conflict. It's a basic humanitarian right for them to be able to flee the war zone if they choose. And right now, they have nowhere to live. So I think that the president has doubled down on his comments that he wants to push Jordan and Egypt to open up their borders and accept Gazan refugees. Secretary of State Rubio is now going to move on to Saudi Arabia, then the United Arab Emirates, and he'll get to hear what they have to say about plans possibly to allow Palestinians in Gaza to move elsewhere.
Yeah, okay, so that's one piece of it, moving them out. But what about the U.S. ownership piece? Do you think that's a good idea? Is that feasible? Is that a good plan?
Well, the president has said that there's not going to be any troops on the ground. So that means that the United States has no way of defending that territory. So I think that the sovereignty will still go back to the original sovereign of the territory, which was Israel before it withdrew from the territory in 2005. And what you might see is some commercial ownership over properties or development inside the Strip. And I think Israel would welcome that. So property ownership on the one hand, sovereignty on the other. I think that sovereignty would have to remain in the hands of the state of Israel.
All right. Thanks again. Well, we've got President Donald Trump there down on the track shaking hands. It looks like his granddaughter is next to him. I'm not sure if that's Carolina or who that is, but the festivities continue there. Once again, just want to say a big thank you to our guest, award-winning documentary filmmaker and CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, Alex Traiman. Appreciate your time. And once again, these live pictures, it is a special day there at the Daytona 500 in Florida. How NASCAR is honoring Gold Star